Beneath the first snowfall of winter, the air hums with ancient secrets and whispers of forgotten names. Tonight, let me guide you to the snowbound kingdom of Velisna, where a silver-feathered sparrow carries riddles of fate, and a princess ventures beyond the edge of certainty. Close your eyes and let the melody of this tale draw you into a world where silence speaks and the unseen waits to be discovered. Drift gently into sleep as the sparrow's song carries you into dreams. In the snowbound kingdom of Velisna, where the winters stretched long and heavy, there was a tradition older than memory, a secret known only to its royal bloodline. It was said that a sparrow, unlike any other in the world, would come each year with the first snowfall. Its feathers shimmered like spun silver, and its eyes gleamed with a light that seemed far too ancient for so small a creature. But its most extraordinary gift lay in its voice, a song spun with riddles that foretold the events of the coming year. The sparrow's visits were a blessing and a curse. Its melody spoke of triumphs, betrayals, harvests both bountiful and lean. No one doubted the truth of its words, for they had never been wrong, though they often revealed their meaning too late to change what was fated. For Princess Elira, the sparrow was more than a bearer of riddles. It was a rare solace in her life. She too was like the winters of Velisna, cold to those who did not look closely, distant to those who feared her silences. As the youngest of the royal family, she had little power but bore the weight of great expectation. Her days were a blur of lessons in diplomacy, history, and grace. But in those fleeting moments with the sparrow, she found something the court could never offer: an honest reflection of the world, unclouded by human ambition. She had been only 10 years old the first time she heard its song. That winter, the sparrow's melody foretold the loss of Velisna's easternmost forests to an unrelenting frost. The court scoffed at the girl's tearful warnings, yet by spring, the barren, skeletal remains of trees proved the sparrow right. Over the years, Elira became attuned to the patterns in its riddles, the way it wove truth into metaphor, leaving threads for her to untangle. Its visits were no longer a mystery to her, but a ritual, a meeting of two kindred souls. As autumn waned, Elira found herself watching the sky with a nervous kind of anticipation. The first snow always came suddenly, as if the heavens could no longer bear the weight of their own silence. The castle courtyards would be quiet then, muffled by frost, and her footsteps would echo as she hurried to the western tower where the sparrow perched. When the snow finally arrived one morning, falling like whispers from an unseen hand, Elira rose before the sun and climbed the spiral staircase to her usual spot. Her breath fogged in the bitter air, and her fingers ached as she gripped the stone railing, but her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. Hours passed, and the sparrow did not come. At first, she told herself it was only delayed, that the bird's flight had perhaps been hindered by the winds. She waited through the morning and into the afternoon, her heartbeat quickening with every passing moment of stillness. When the sun began its slow descent, and the sparrow still did not appear, a strange dread settled over her, cold as the snow beneath her feet. The next day was no different, nor the next. By the end of the week, the castle's halls were filled with whispers. The court, too timid to approach her directly, speculated behind closed doors. What could the sparrow's absence mean? Some claimed it was an omen of disaster, a sign that the listener had fallen out of favor with the unseen forces that governed its fate. Others suggested it was a curse, a punishment for some unknown transgression. Elira did not share their theories, but her heart was heavy with the knowledge that something had gone terribly wrong. In the long, silent hours of the night, she dreamed of the sparrow, not as it had been in life, but as a flickering shadow, its song reduced to a mournful cry. In one dream, it perched atop a tree in a forest she had never seen, its silver feathers dulled and falling like ash. When she reached out to it, the forest itself seemed to recoil, its branches twisting to block her path. A single phrase echoed in her mind as she awoke, cold sweat clinging to her skin. To find the song, one must seek the unseen. The words stayed with her, repeating like a melody she could not forget. They gnawed at her resolve, growing louder until she could no longer ignore them. If the sparrow would not come to her, then she would find it. Whatever force had silenced its song, she would face it, even if it meant venturing beyond the safety of the castle walls and into the unknown. With a heavy heart and a sense of determination that burned brighter than her fear, Elira made her decision. By the light of the moon, she packed a small bundle of provisions and donned her cloak, the fabric shimmering faintly as though stitched with starlight. Tomorrow, she would enter the enchanted forest. The first whispers of dawn stretched pale and thin across the sky as Elira stepped beyond the gates of the castle. Snow crunched beneath her boots, the only sound in a world that seemed to hold its breath. The air was sharp, biting, carrying a stillness so deep it felt alive. She had walked these grounds many times, but they felt unfamiliar now, heavy with a silence that pressed against her ears. The sparrow's absence was more than a void. It was a wound carved into the heart of the kingdom. Without its song, there was no prophecy, no guidance, only a year that loomed before them like an uncharted sea. The court had grown restless, their fears spiraling into murmurs of ill fate. But to Elira, the silence was something deeper, an unraveling of the tether between the known and the unknown, a break in the delicate weave of their world. As she crossed the frozen fields, her gaze turned toward the edge of the enchanted forest. Its boundary was marked not by walls or gates, but by a shift in the air. an almost imperceptible shimmer where the ordinary gave way to the extraordinary. The trees beyond were unlike those of Velisna's other woods. Their branches twisted skyward like beseeching hands, and their trunks bore faint, glowing symbols that pulsed in a rhythm too slow to be human. Even from a distance, the forest exuded an awareness as though it watched her approach. The first step into its shadow felt like crossing into another world. The light dimmed, filtered through a canopy that seemed to stretch infinitely above her. Snow still blanketed the ground, but here it shimmered faintly, as if infused with an inner light. Elira hesitated, the weight of the forest's presence settling over her. It was not hostile, not yet, but it was expectant. She could feel it in the way the air seemed to hold still around her, waiting. The dream's words echoed in her mind again. To find the song, one must seek the unseen. She repeated them silently, a mantra to steady herself as she pressed deeper into the woods. At first the trail was clear, marked by faint footprints. Hers, or perhaps another's, long erased by time. But soon the path dissolved, swallowed by the forest's endless maze. Elira paused, her breath visible in the cold air, and glanced around. It was then that she noticed them. Small, silver-tipped feathers scattered across the snow like breadcrumbs in a tail meant to lure the unwary. She crouched, picking one up. It was light, impossibly delicate, yet it glimmered with an otherworldly sheen. The sparrow's feathers. The realization sent a shiver down her spine, not from cold, but from the confirmation that she was being led. Whether to safety or peril she could not yet say. The feathers formed a trail, winding between trees whose bark whispered faintly as she passed. The sound was maddeningly indistinct, like words just out of reach. Elira strained to hear, but the harder she tried, the more the whispers eluded her. She pressed on, though each step felt heavier than the last, as though the forest itself tested her resolve. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes, for time in the enchanted forest was as fluid as a dream. The deeper she ventured, the stranger the world became. The snow glowed brighter, casting a faint, silvery light on her path. Shadows danced without source, their shapes unrecognizable, shifting as though alive. Once, she thought she saw a figure among the trees, but when she turned to look, it vanished, leaving only the faint impression of a face carved into the bark. It was not until she reached a clearing that she paused. At the center stood a single tree, its trunk gnarled and ancient, its branches bare save for a thin veil of frost. Something about it drew her, though she could not say why. As she stepped closer, she felt the weight of a gaze, not from above or behind, but from the tree itself. Its surface was carved with symbols that glowed faintly, like embers in the snow. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the bark, and the forest seemed to exhale. A low, mournful cry echoed through the clearing. Elira turned, her heart racing but saw nothing. Then faintly she heard it, the first sound of a song, distant and fragmented, carried on a wind that chilled her to her bones. The melody was familiar yet fractured, as though it had been broken and scattered. The sparrow. Its voice called to her, and though she could not see it, she felt its presence somewhere beyond the veil of trees. With renewed determination, she straightened and continued forward, following the sound. The feathers reappeared, scattered across her path, but now their glow had dimmed, and the whispers in the trees grew louder, more insistent. The forest no longer felt expectant. It felt alive. The wind shifted, carrying with it a chill that gnawed at Elira's resolve. The trail of silver feathers led her into the heart of the enchanted forest, a place whispered about in myths, yet scarcely described. Each step brought her deeper into its realm, where the laws of nature unraveled like loose threads in the fabric of reality. Here, the air carried an unsettling resonance, as if the forest itself had taken breath. The trees bent toward her path, their bark gleaming faintly in the half-light, etched with symbols she couldn't read, but felt deep in her chest. Every so often, the trail of feathers would disappear entirely, leaving her to wander until the forest saw fit to reveal the next marker. It was not guiding her, it was deciding. Elira pressed on, though the weight of the unknown bore down upon her. The ground beneath her boots began to shift, no longer a blanket of snow, but a mixture of ash and frost that clung to her steps. Above, the canopy seemed to stretch endlessly, the sky lost behind a web of twisting branches that glowed faintly, as if capturing starlight. Her breath fogged in the cold, but it felt thicker now, as though the air carried unseen threads pulling her deeper into the labyrinth. The sparrow's song drifted on the edges of her hearing, distant and fractured, like shards of glass scattered across a marble floor. It wasn't the melody she remembered from years past. This song was different, melancholy and broken, as though it carried the weight of something lost. The sound drew her onward, even as the forest grew stranger with each step. Ahead, she came upon a fork in the trail. To the left, a path plunged into darkness, the air colder and heavier, as though the shadows themselves had weight. To the right, a faint glow illuminated the way, the light flickering like the last embers of a dying fire. Elira hesitated, her instincts urging her toward the light, but the sparrow's faint cry came from the darker path. She tightened her cloak, feeling its starlit threads hum faintly against her skin, and chose the shadows. The air grew colder still, and the whispers in the trees grew louder, forming words she could almost make out but not quite grasp. Faces appeared in the bark, anguished, hollow-eyed, their mouths moving as though speaking secrets meant only for the forest. Elira did not pause to listen, though the pull of their silent lament was nearly overwhelming. Her resolve was tested further when the trail of feathers stopped entirely, vanishing into a clearing filled with a dense, swirling mist. She hesitated, the weight of the silence pressing down on her. Then faintly she heard it again, the sparrow's cry, low and mournful, cutting through the stillness like a distant echo. To find the song, one must seek the unseen. The words from her dream returned, a whisper in her mind. Her heart raced as she stepped into the clearing, the mist clinging to her like a second skin. The ground here was soft, almost spongy, and as she moved forward, she felt an almost imperceptible shift beneath her feet. The mist grew thicker, swirling around her legs and obscuring the ground entirely. It was then she saw it, a faint glimmer of silver among the fog. She hurried toward it, her breath catching in her throat. But as she approached, the glimmer shifted, retreating just beyond her reach. Her frustration flared, but she steadied herself. This was not a test of speed or strength. It was one of patience and perception. Elira closed her eyes, tuning out the whispers, the cold, the pull of the mist. Instead, she focused on the song, faint but present, its melody like a thread weaving through the silence. She took a step forward, then another, moving toward the sound rather than the light. When she opened her eyes, the mist had cleared, and she stood before a tree unlike any other she had seen. Its bark was silver and smooth, and its branches stretched high, as though trying to pierce the heavens. Perched on a low branch was the sparrow. Its feathers were dull, almost grey, and its eyes, once bright, seemed clouded with sorrow. Elira stepped closer, her voice trembling. "What has silenced you?" The sparrow did not sing, but its gaze shifted toward the base of the tree. There, tangled among the roots, was a faintly glowing light, a hollow carved into the tree's core, pulsing like a heartbeat. Elira knelt, peering into the hollow, and saw the faint outline of a figure within, its form shifting like smoke. The whispers grew louder now, distinct and clear. "To restore the song, you must barter with the keeper." Elira felt a chill crawl up her spine. The keeper. She had heard the name in the ancient tales, spoken of in fearful whispers, a figure bound by a curse to guard the forest's deepest secrets. Her pulse quickened as she realized the truth. To save the sparrow's song, she would have to face the keeper and offer something in return. Gathering her courage, Elira straightened and placed a hand on the glowing hollow. The forest seemed to exhale around her, the mist recoiling as the light intensified. The tree itself groaned, its ancient bark splitting just enough to reveal a path descending into darkness. Without hesitation, Elira stepped into the hollow, her resolve unshaken, though her heart trembled with the weight of what lay ahead. The hollow closed behind Elira, sealing her in a world of silence and shadows. The descent was steep and disorienting, The walls of the tunnel pulsed faintly with the same silver light that had lured her forward, yet the glow offered no warmth. It was a cold, detached illumination, as if the forest had drawn the light from distant stars and bound it here. Elira kept one hand on the wall to steady herself, her breath shallow in the stifling air. The faint sound of the sparrow's broken melody lingered in her ears, but it seemed farther away now, like an echo trapped in the folds of time. Her other hand gripped the folds of her cloak, its faint shimmer a fragile reassurance against the unknown. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling vanishing into darkness. The air was thick with an oppressive stillness, broken only by the faint rhythmic hum of something ancient and alive. At the center of the chamber stood a figure, a shadow-given form, its edges blurred as though it could not fully exist in this world. Its eyes gleamed with a cold, merciless light, reflecting countless stories that could never be told. The keeper of secrets. Elira's breath caught as the figure turned its gaze toward her. It had no face, no features, only a void that seemed to consume the light around it. Yet she felt its presence like a weight pressing against her chest, demanding not just attention, but understanding. "You have come for the sparrow's song," the keeper said. Its voice a low, resonant whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Elira swallowed the lump in her throat. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "The sparrow's song has been silenced, and the kingdom cannot move forward without it." The keeper tilted its head, the motion unnervingly fluid, like smoke curling in the air. "Do you truly believe the kingdom cannot endure without knowing what lies ahead? Or is it you who cannot bear the weight of uncertainty?" The words struck a chord within her, but she pushed the thought aside. "I came to restore the song," she said firmly. "Tell me what I must do." The keeper seemed to smile, though it had no mouth. "Every song carries a price, child. The sparrow's voice is bound by truths. To restore it, you must give me a truth in return, one that defines you, one that you hold dear." Elira hesitated, the weight of the demand sinking into her. A truth that defined her. She thought of her kingdom, her family, the countless moments that had shaped her. What truth could she offer that would not leave her hollowed out, undone? The keeper waited, its presence unyielding. After a long silence, Elira spoke. "I will give you my name." The words felt like an unraveling, a thread pulled loose from the fabric of her being. Her name, Elira. It was more than a word. It was a foundation, a vessel for her memories, her identity, her place in the world. Without it, she would be untethered, adrift in the currents of her own life. The keeper's eyes gleamed brighter, as though it had been waiting for this exact offering. "Your name," it said, its voice tinged with a satisfaction that sent shivers down her spine. "A fair trade. Do you understand what this means?" Elira nodded, though the full weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest. I understand. The keeper raised a shadowed hand, and the chamber filled with a deafening silence. The hum in the air grew stronger, vibrating through the ground, the walls, the very marrow of her bones. Elira felt something shift within her, a part of herself being pulled away, leaving behind an emptiness she could not describe. When the silence broke, it was with the sound of a song. The sparrow's voice rang out, clear and pure, its melody weaving through the chamber like a living thread. The song carried no riddles, no prophecies, only a haunting, wordless tune that seemed to stretch into eternity. The keeper stepped aside, and Elira saw the sparrow perched on a low branch of a tree that had not been there moments before. Its feathers shimmered once more, brighter than ever, and its eyes gleamed with the same ancient light she had always known. The bird looked at her, its song a bittersweet farewell. You are free to go, the keeper said. But know this, your name will fade from the memories of all who knew it. Even you will not remember it. You will be nameless, a stranger to your own past. Elira nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. Without a word, she turned and followed the sparrow as it flew toward the exit, its song guiding her through the darkness. When she emerged from the hollow, the forest seemed brighter, its oppressive weight lifted. The sparrow flew ahead, its melody filling the air. But Elira felt an unfamiliar emptiness inside her, a sense that something vital had been left behind. The forest whispered as she walked, calling out a name she no longer recognized. The sparrow's song carried Elira through the forest, a melody unburdened by riddles, yet imbued with something greater, a freedom that had not existed before. Its notes filled the air like fragile threads, weaving a tapestry that seemed to mend the very fabric of the enchanted forest. The once heavy silence was replaced by a hum of life, as though the trees themselves had begun to breathe again. Yet, with every step, Elira felt the hollow in her chest grow deeper. The keeper's warning lingered like frost on her thoughts. Your name will fade from the memories of all who knew it. Even you will not remember it. Already, the word that had once been her anchor in the world began to slip through her mind like water through her fingers. She reached for it, trying to hold it, to shape its sound on her lips, but it evaded her grasp. The words felt like an unraveling, a thread pulled loose from the fabric of her being. Her name, Elira. It was more than a word. It was a foundation, a vessel for her memories, her identity, her place in the world. Without it, she would be untethered, adrift in the currents of her own life. The keeper's eyes gleamed brighter, as though it had been waiting for this exact offering. Your name, it said, its voice tinged with a satisfaction that sent shivers down her spine. A fair trade. Do you understand what this means? Elira nodded, though the full weight of her decision pressed heavily on her chest. I understand. The keeper raised a shadowed hand, and the chamber filled with a deafening silence. The hum in the air grew stronger, vibrating through the ground, the walls, the very marrow of her bones. Elira felt something shift within her, a part of herself being pulled away, leaving behind an emptiness she could not describe. When the silence broke, it was with the sound of a song. The sparrow's voice rang out, clear and pure, its melody weaving through the chamber like a living thread. The song carried no riddles, no prophecies, only a haunting, wordless tune that seemed to stretch into eternity. The keeper stepped aside, and Elira saw the sparrow perched on a low branch of a tree that had not been there moments before. Its feathers shimmered once more, brighter than ever, and its eyes gleamed with the same ancient light she had always known. The bird looked at her, its song a bittersweet farewell. You are free to go, the keeper said. But know this, your name will fade from the memories of all who knew it. Even you will not remember it. You will be nameless, a stranger to your own past. Elira nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back. Without a word, she turned and followed the sparrow as it flew toward the exit, its song guiding her through the darkness. When she emerged from the hollow, the forest seemed brighter, its oppressive weight lifted. The sparrow flew ahead, its melody filling the air. But Elira felt an unfamiliar emptiness inside her, a sense that something vital had been left behind. The forest whispered as she walked, calling out a name she no longer recognized. The sparrow's song carried Elira through the forest, a melody unburdened by riddles, yet imbued with something greater, a freedom that had not existed before. Its notes filled the air like fragile threads, weaving a tapestry that seemed to mend the very fabric of the enchanted forest. The once heavy silence was replaced by a hum of life, as though the trees themselves had begun to breathe again. Yet, with every step, Elira felt the hollow in her chest grow deeper. The keeper's warning lingered like frost on her thoughts. Your name will fade from the memories of all who knew it. Even you will not remember it. Already, the word that had once been her anchor in the world began to slip through her mind like water through her fingers. She reached for it, trying to hold it, to shape its sound on her lips, but it evaded her grasp.